We got married fairly young, and we both just decided for many reasons we didn't want kids. And then at some point we heard the acronym DINK, and I think just really fell in love with it.
Children are the death of net worth. Pretty crude, but honestly very true.
Right, because during a population crisis where every first world country is below replacement, the smartest thing to do is promote childlessness and to give people reasons why they shouldn't have children. I mean, watching this mini documentary, you would think that kids are the worst thing in the world, and every couple should be a DINK or a dual income no kids couple.
If anybody is considering becoming a DINK, as a financial planner, I highly recommend that strategy. I recommend it to my clients. When my clients tell me that's an intentional choice they're going to make, I am a big fan of it.
As opposed to like the 100 other things you can do to outweigh the cost of having kids? If we're talking about this purely from a transactional standpoint, because this video doesn't address anything emotional, having kids makes it much easier to network, which can easily lead to better job opportunities that you would not have had if you didn't have kids. That could mean you get a better office job because one of the parents on your kid's baseball team is the hiring manager at a major company. Or if you're a blue-collar worker, you become the guy who installs and fixes all the air conditioners of all the parents on the local sports teams. I knew many parents who did that when I was a kid. That being said, there seems to be a large sentiment from the legacy media against having children. We call it the legacy media now because not enough people watch it anymore to call it the mainstream media. But there is a strong sentiment against having children in the media, whether it's this piece here from Vox that I covered a couple years ago, or this one here from The Economist, or the one that I just showed from CNBC called Why More Americans Are Going Child-Free, which is actually not the only hit piece that CNBC has made to push the idea of not having children. They did this one a few years ago called Does Having Kids Make You Happier? Oh, and look, it's that lady from the Vox video that I covered who basically said that having kids will make you depressed. Let's see what she had to say.
Parenthood is like a roller coaster ride of ups and downs, of highs and lows. And life without children is simply much more stable. It has much less variation. My financial well-being would be better off if I had not had children. And that's true of all child-free people in the United States. They are financially better off.
All of them are better off financially? That seems like an incredibly easy to attack generalization that a university professor should not be saying. So we have our narrative, we have our DINK couple that serves as an anecdote that the audience can connect to, and we have our consultants who are purely here to advertise the university or business they represent, like Wells Fargo. Hey, remember what they got caught doing a couple years ago? Anyway, let's see why you shouldn't have children.
Some couples are contemplating having children at the same time that they're still paying off student loans that they incurred when they were 18 to 22 years old.
All the more reason to try to convince more people to not waste their money by going to college. Not every degree is worth $50,000 to $100,000 of debt. If your time in college doesn't lead you to a career that makes it easy to pay off what you spent on your degree, then you screwed up. You can easily research the job market for how much your degree is worth, and if you don't know how to do that, then just look it up on YouTube. Certainly you should not be going to an Ivy League school unless your rich parents are paying for it, or your degree is super valuable. But these days, for the most part, colleges are just basically scamming people out of tons of money and wasting their time. Colleges need to be restructured to get rid of useless programs like these.
Hey, I'm Nina, and I studied the arts, education, and social justice.
I'm Joyce. I studied decolonial intimacies, indigenous politics of resistance.
Hi, I'm Nunyala. I'm studying living artfully, art as ritual therapy, and pathways of decoloniality.
Okay, now you're just making shit up. How much does NYU cost? But these programs should not exist, and college needs to get rid of general education. Nobody remembers any of their GE anyway, and this would cut the cost of college in half. If I'm wasting money on a communications major, I should not have to take chemistry. We already have enough general education in elementary school, middle school, and high school. Now, this won't solve the student debt crisis, but I will say that because of how interest rates work, $20,000 is a lot easier to pay off than $40,000. All right, next reason why kids are bad.
So if you look at inflation within the childcare market, it surpasses general overall inflation within the economy.
And we have more proof that moving the culture towards households with two working parents was a mistake. Not only does this flood the labor market with more competition, which gives employers a lot of power and lowers wages, but it also removes the benefit of children having the people who care about them the most taking care of them, which are their own parents. Now the market has corrected itself to the extent that childcare is too expensive to afford.
One of my very closest friends, she's been struggling with the reality that the take-home pay she makes is about equal to what childcare would be. that's a really hard position to be in.
Well, there you go. Don't work. Problem solved. If you can't provide enough economic value to offset the cost of childcare for your family, then you shouldn't be working. Now, I understand that we live in the real world, and obviously for a lot of families, having one parent stay home is not realistic. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be pushing to try to make it so as many families as possible can afford to have one parent who stays at home. Not only would this be better for children, but it would also lower demand for childcare, which would decrease its price and make having kids more affordable, which would encourage more people to have them. There are plenty of ways to make it so more people can afford a one working parent home. One would be telling young people, hey, instead of getting a stupid degree in gender studies, how about you become an x-ray tech or a nurse? You can also push guys more towards trades. Trades make a ton of money, and for a lot of them, the education is just a few months, maybe a year or two, which is still way less time than college. Some of them are apprenticeships, which means they'll pay you while you're in school. These young people could also move to cheaper states. California and New York aren't the only places to live. They could create parenting co-ops where everyone takes turns watching each other's kids so they don't have to pay a babysitter every time. They could learn how to cook instead of door dashing everything, and they can learn basic repair and maintenance so affording to live doesn't cost an astronomical amount of money. Back in the past, people would do everything themselves instead of outsourcing all their chores. So with a little forward planning, there are a lot of things you can do to make it so you can afford to have kids. Moving on, let's get to my favorite part of this CNBC documentary.
We started investing in our early 20s. I feel really safe because we have this strong nest egg of ETFs that are accessible and fairly liquid. And then we also have our long-term savings, which are, tied up in IRAs. We can choose what our aging years look like because we've saved to plan for that eventuality.
So this is the crux of the video's argument against having kids. They say it's better for your finances. This, by the way, is not talking about any of the psychological benefits of having a family. I bring this up because relationships and kids are a profound factor in keeping people stable and away from behaviors like drug addiction. Something to look out for if you plan to stay permanently single. It's a lot harder to keep yourself away from degeneracy. But okay, let's hear what CNBC has to say. How much better is it for your finances to not have kids?
According to census data, DINKs can save 9% more for retirement each year compared to dual-income couples with children.
That's it? I'm going to sacrifice having a family so I can save $400 more a year? How much are these DINKs wasting money and not improving their career prospects if they can only come up with an extra $400 a year? This documentary starts out by saying that it's like $300,000 to raise each kid. You figure with those numbers that DINKs would be maxing out their 401k every year, but based on these numbers, you could reasonably assume that people who have kids are way more responsible with their money. No way, you've got to be kidding me. CNBC cites Rocket Mortgage for this data, which is not the primary source of it, by the way. This means that a major organization is too stupid or too lazy to cite the primary source, or they're citing Rocket Mortgage as the source to advertise yet another bank in this video. Anyway, the Rocket Mortgage article that is citing the U.S. Census Bureau current population survey says that a key takeaway is that families with kids are 22% more likely to own their own home. Why wasn't this in the CNBC video? Isn't homeownership important to most people?
Another 2021 study found that childless adults aged 55 and older had a personal median net worth of $153,900. compared to $130,400 for biological parents.
Again, that's it? You're telling people to sacrifice all the benefit that a family can bring to get an extra $23,000 in net worth? Sure, it's a noticeable difference, but at the start of this video, they were saying that kids were the death of finances.
Children are the death of net worth. Pretty crude, but honestly very true.
Isn't this kind of an overstatement based on the data that they showed? The person who did the editing decided to put that clip in there despite their info showing that it's not really a life-ending difference. If kids are so expensive for middle-class families, and having kids is financial suicide, then I would expect DINKs to have like double the net worth of people who decided to have kids.
If you have $1 and if you have to choose how to use it, a DINK can prioritize savings, retirements, investments, both in the equities market as well as things like real estate or second properties.
Yep, let's have the Wells Fargo lady tell everyone to make sure to put their money in the bank or put their money towards investments that banks own. This whole segment wasn't actually just CNBC telling people to not have children so they can remind people to use a bank that's famous for screwing their customers over, was it? Outside of that, to me it just sounds like a lot of the notion of not wanting to have kids stems from selfishness and hedonism, and the people they chose for this documentary don't really debunk that.
Not having children has given us the freedom to pursue other things, remodeling our home. I am a beekeeper.
Cool? Remodeling a house and beekeeping doesn't really describe purpose, and most people's purpose is their children. Having purpose and meaning keeps people away from degeneracy, and certainly removing social conventions like going to church have produced a net negative on people's social well-being and sense of community, so I don't think that most of the people who are moving towards not having kids because of a modern economic crisis are going to have the mental bandwidth to figure out an adequate replacement for not having kids when it comes to their life purpose. Plus, when it comes to replacing what religion used to provide, it seems like a sizable number of people have had a nasty habit of replacing Christianity with idolizing an authoritarian government, and my hypothesis on the childlessness thing is that the less vigilant people are going to replace that with hedonism and depression as opposed to a fulfilling life. So not a great idea to trash age-old social norms so that you can solder custom keyboards.
The free time is actually one of the biggest things for me. So we built me a little office / bedroom out here. We definitely have some more expensive hobbies. I build mechanical keyboards, like computer keyboards, in my spare time. And just parts and stuff for that can be very expensive.
Cool. So if you don't have kids, you can have extra money for a plastic Master Sword replica, a Pip-Boy, and some Star Wars merch. By the way, lots of free time isn't as great as it sounds. Obviously, don't work yourself to death, but having endless amounts of free time will actually make you more depressed and less mentally stable. Also, we aren't even talking about some of the more insane stuff that's coming from the movement towards childlessness. If you go on the Reddit forum r/childfree, it's basically like an angry incel forum, but for mostly women who don't want kids. This forum largely seems to be about complaining about having to exist around kids. Mother of 3 on the bus yesterday, where the poster talks about typical child behavior that is not offensive and can mostly just be ignored. Look at this part that says kid 2 and talks about how this monster tortured a man by looking at him. Is it the mom's fault for allowing her child to stare at the guy? Or is it the guy's fault for not just simply saying hello to the kid? This is not that big of a deal. Interacting with a child who happens to be in your proximity is not the worst burden to bear. Here's a similar one about babies crying on a plane. I fly a lot, and 4 crying babies on one flight is not that common, and if you don't like it, noise-canceling headphones are not that expensive. It's only a 3-hour flight. Unless you're talking about the 2-hour delay, which is not the fault of the kids, this is a mountain out of a molehill. Here's another poster complaining that their friends like to talk about their kids and how they are forced to interact with the kids too. You would think that these people believe that children are a disease. This one here calls a kid a gremlin and the mom a breeder. You see, they even have their own angry incel terms. They aren't foids, they're breeders. And last, we have a person who thinks that having to share a mango with a child is the worst thing in the world. Why would you not want to share things with your kids? Like that guy in the Olympics who won the silver medal in the air gun competition, who immediately gives the medal to his daughter. That's how an adult should behave. Not only should you share the good mango, but you should eat the crappy mango so that your kid can have the good ones. I will say one thing though, I don't like the CNBC documentary on dinks because I think the goal of it is to take people who are on the fence about it and push them into not having children. However, there are certainly people who do not want kids that should not have them. Outside of maybe the 16-year-olds who are posting on this subreddit, if anyone from r/childfree comes at me saying that they don't want kids, I'm not trying to convince them otherwise. Now, that's not to say that every person who's choosing to not have kids is some angry spinster who hates children. I know people personally who don't want kids and are great around them. To get back to what I said in the beginning, though, I don't like this whole agenda being pushed by the legacy media that's in favor of depopulation. I don't like this stuff whether it's them parading around Chelsea Handler with how much she enjoys acting like a teenager at 49, because she chose to not have kids, or when it's big figureheads like Bill Gates saying that we need to lower the population to save the environment.
So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0, and that's going to be based on the number of people and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
And then he follows that up with this.
In fact, if you could pick just one thing to lower the price of, to reduce poverty, by far you would pick energy.
I know I've already showed these clips in a different video, but wow, it's just so convenient that you environmentalists keep attacking the one thing that would make everything cheaper, which hurts poor people, by the way, instead of trying to figure out an alternate solution. So I'm not really a fan of all these celebrities and political figures telling everyone to do their part to save the environment by not having kids. Seth Rogen being one of the latest ones with that ideology.
You referenced earlier you don't have any kids.
I do not. That has helped me succeed as well. Well, I'm 40 again, it's not now. If more than anything, the conversation is like, honestly, thank God we don't have children. We get to do whatever we want and we can just do that. And we don't have to raise a child, which the world does not need right now.
Wow, I was not ready to hear that Seth Rogen was only 40 years old when this was filmed. He looks much older than that. I guess that's what years of drug abuse will do to you. But this whole don't have a family to save the environment narrative has affected people's opinions on whether or not to have kids, and I've heard a number of people who are choosing to not have kids say this stuff.
So there's also a movement of people who choose not to have children for environmental reasons. As we know, our planet is going through a pretty catastrophic environmental crisis. So there's a growing movement of people who choose not to have children because they don't want to compound that problem. They don't want to bring more people into an already, dying world. And I can 100% see this. And I think for many years, that was probably the reason why I didn't want to have a child, was because I felt like I already live a life of relative luxury in the sense that I have a big car, I drive a big car, I have things, right? I consume things. And I felt that my single biggest contribution to the environment could be simply not procreating.
Personally, I think this is a very stupid reason to not have kids. You're sacrificing human connection, community, and moments that will forever change your life in a good way because of something that might happen in the future that we probably will just end up solving with better technology like always. And I also have a really hard time believing that any of these major companies like, say, Apple, actually care about the environment when they go out of their way to fight right to repair bills and make it so instead of spending $50 fixing a little faulty wire in your laptop, you have to buy an entirely new computer. This whole "we care about the environment" page from Apple is a complete joke, and Apple is not the only company doing this. Tons of companies do it, from cell phones to washing machines to tractors to refrigerators to vacuums.
Welcome to today's episode of How You're Getting Effed. I'm your host, Louis Rossman. Today I'd like to talk about a company that is near and dear to my heart when it comes to companies that I will never give money to again, and that is a company called Shark Vacuums. Now, this consumer had an experience with his vacuum that was very similar to mine, and we're going to go over this in great detail. They bought 2 Shark vacuums, and one of these vacuums was only 6 months old. Both of these vacuums have a supposedly 5-year warranty, which is going to trick people into believing that because they spend $300 to $400 in a vacuum cleaner, that they're actually going to get good service. However, it says what is not covered under the warranty. Normal wear and tear of wearable parts such as foam filters, HEPA filters, or pads. The customer had worn out plastic wheels on the front of the vacuum. How this type of thing wears out after 6 months is beyond me. Now, he calls them to ask where I can buy this because he cannot find it on his website. They say that he has to buy the entire bottom piece. He's like, why do I need the whole bottom piece when all I need is wheels? But fine, fuck it, you win. However, she says, we don't even have the entire bottom assembly in stock. You can't get it from us. But maybe one of the retail outlets you bought it from has those parts. When is the last time that you went to a Walmart or a Best Buy and you were able to purchase replacement parts for your vacuum? Now, the idea of a HEPA filter being a wear part, a brush being a wear part, fine. The wheels are a wear part? Is Shark saying the quiet part out loud that the wheels on their vacuum are so horrible you should expect to have to replace these every 3 to 6 months? Not only replace them, but they won't even have that part in stock for a product that you purchased new 6 months ago?
So quit all the BS about how you guys care about the environment until you stop fighting people's right to have ownership over the things that they buy, and stop fighting people's ability to make small repairs so that their 1-year-old MacBook stays on a computer desk instead of going into a landfill, only to be replaced again a year later over an easy repair or a known design flaw that was not fixed for like 10 years. Getting back to the CNBC video, they continue with what I call a plausible deniability clause, where they basically say, see, we didn't say everything about kids was bad.
But the rise of dinks isn't such great news for the economy as a whole. Historically, lower birth rates have been associated with slower economic growth, and critical social programs such as Social Security depend heavily on population growth.
They did this in the other documentary too, but the whole point of this singular statement in this 11-minute video is to give them a cop-out so they can say, see, we didn't only say negative things about kids. Remember that 20 seconds that we spent saying that lower birth rates are bad for the economy? When this moment isn't until we are already most of the way through the video, and they have already laid the groundwork that would make people think that they shouldn't have kids. Oh, and then they followed up with how unfair it is for people who are child-free.
For dinks, the biggest challenges are often not financial.
There could be additional pressure as dinks get older for people within their family to assume that they can take care of certain obligations. For example, if you have an aging parent, dinks might be the ones that are relied upon because it's presumed you have disposable income or you have disposable time to take on these responsibilities.
Things are so hard. People expect us to do stuff because we have more free time. Well, yeah, if you want a well-running society, then how about you don't make it all about you? Why would you not want to help your family when they need it? This sounds very sociopathic, and it certainly doesn't help get rid of the stereotype that people who don't want kids are selfish and immature. Guys, you don't know how bad it is. They don't make Facebook groups for people without kids.
I think that there is a self-care aspect that is minimized when you're a dink. So there are many mom groups or, daddy-daughter dances. There aren't groups for, hey, I'm a professional woman and I just want to go home and read a book and take care of myself tonight.
Well, depending on what she means by take care of myself tonight, there are plenty of forums for that. To finish off, the dink couple probably gives some of the worst advice.
Don't go into the DINK lifestyle just like, I don't have kids, so I just have more money and can do whatever. It still takes the work of planning for your future, putting money away. If you're not gonna have kids, make sure you still save money for your future.
If you don't have kids, make sure you save. This advice is super transactional and again, probably cut just to promote Wells Fargo and Rocket Mortgage. In reality, saving money is the least of your worries if you aren't going to have kids, because you should be spending a ton of time figuring out substitutes for the things that having a family provides, like a sense of purpose and community. The people who promote this stuff aren't really thinking about things like, hey, in a dink couple, what happens when one of you dies? My grandmother died a bunch of years ago, and if my grandfather did not have kids, he would have been done, absolutely done. It took 2 years of everyone coming together to help out before he was okay again. What are you going to do when that happens? And don't say friends, because a lot of your friends are going to be dead, if not all of them.
Almost all my friends are dead.
Yep.
It's just so awful when you, all your main social events are going to the hospital, going to funerals, and going to visit widows.
Welcome to the reality of getting old. So honestly, I think for most people, choosing to be childless is not a good path, especially if they are being convinced to do it for self-defense purposes, like not being able to afford it. There are many things that you can do to change your situation, but if you have it in your head that you can't change things, then you aren't going to figure out stuff like, hey, maybe I should learn a trade instead of racking up a bunch of student debt in college. And maybe that's not the easiest mindset to get into, but one of the things that I have found to help make a pattern shift is to change your environment. I spend a lot of time in my office making content, and I was feeling like a change needed to happen, so I moved all the furniture around, primarily to help me start live streaming again. And ever since I did that, I feel way better, I'm way more productive, and I'm way quicker to put effort into learning new things and changing my behaviors. It's surprising how different I feel just from changing the direction that I face when I sit down in my office. This is why Jordan Peterson tells messy people to clean their rooms. It changes their environment, which will cause them to start thinking differently and help break their negative patterns. Try it. And if you want a strong step-by-step process of how to develop good behaviors, then I recommend that you read or listen to a book called Atomic Habits. I've never seen a better guide on how to reliably build good habits and get rid of bad ones. You may not be able to solve all the world's problems in one day, but if you stay consistent, things that seemed impossible when you started will seem easy over time. Anyway, thanks for watching, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.